Welcome to the debate.
It is great to be here.
Today, I want to begin our discussion by taking us into a room that I think pretty much every federal IT manager knows all too well. It is a conference room, probably windowless.
Slightly too warm.
Slightly too warm, exactly. And a tragedy is basically unfolding in slow motion. It is the exact dialogue that feeds what I call the software landfill. So picture a program manager, let's call him Dave, walking up to his technical lead, Jen. And Dave is just beaming. He is holding this glossy vendor one-pager. He says, "Big news, leadership just signed off on the new enterprise data platform. 7 figures, full license. We start Monday."
I can already hear the enthusiasm there. And I suspect Jen, being the technical lead who actually has to build the thing, has a few questions.
Oh, she definitely does. Jen asks, "Well, that's great, Dave, but what data are we actually putting into this platform?" And Dave just waves a hand and says, that is phase 2. So Jen asks, "Okay, do we have defined data standards for ingestion so the systems can actually talk to each other?" Dave says, "That's phase 3. Jen presses harder. She says, "Who actually owns the data governance policy? Like, who says what truth actually looks like?" Dave looks uncomfortable and says, "Well, that's really more of a legal question."
Right. Pass the buck.
Exactly. So finally, Jen just pauses and says, "So to be clear, we bought a 7-figure Ferrari, but we have no fuel, no maps, and no driver?" And Dave replies, "Yes, Jen, but you should have seen the demo. The dashboard had live charts."
Look, that is a painful vignette. And let's be honest, it is a bit of a caricature, but it frames the tension perfectly. Here we are in 2026. Technology is moving at Formula One speeds, and the central question we are wrestling with today is this: can federal agencies afford the luxury of a years-long data governance exercise before buying the tools they need to meet urgent mission requirements? Or does the reality of the threat landscape mean that we just have to acquire the capability first and, fix the data later?
I am firmly in the camp that there is a mandated sequence here dictated by the basic physics of information. You simply cannot buy your way out of a data problem. If you skip the foundation, you are not modernizing. You are just financing the landfill. We need to be shifting funding from reactive tool buys to proactive data excellence.
And I am here to represent the reality of the operator. We have problems today. We have budgets today. And we have adversaries who, frankly, are not waiting around for us to finalize a data dictionary. Governance is important, conceptually, sure, but in practice, to a federal IT manager, it often looks a lot like obstruction. We need tools that work, and we need them right now.
All right, then let's get right into it. I want to lay out my position clearly up front. There is a specific maturity curve in enterprise architecture that you cannot cheat. I don't care how much money you throw at it. There are 4 words that matter in enterprise data, and they have to occur in this exact order: data governance, data standards, data management, and data exchange.
That sounds very logical on a whiteboard, but let's break that down for a second. Why that specific order? Why can't a well-funded agency do those things in parallel?
Because it is a strict dependency chain. Governance is the policy. It's the rules of the road. Who owns what? Who decides that a specific field is a date format or a text string? Standards are the structure, the language we speak. Management is the actual storage and maintenance. And exchange is the movement and utilization. Here is the hard truth for that IT manager holding the checkbook. Your favorite software tool, the one Dave bought because of the live charts.
The 7-figure Ferrari.
The Ferrari. That tool belongs exclusively to those last 2 categories, management and exchange. It never belongs in the first 2. You cannot use a commercially bought tool to solve a governance problem. You cannot AI or outsource what you cannot govern.
Okay, I understand the theoretical framework there, but I want to push back on the implication that buying the tool first is inherently a mistake or just reactive. We are looking at AI in 2026 as a complete earthquake. It is comparable to the printing press or the discovery of fire. The excitement Dave felt is palpable because the potential is real. Agencies have real budgets aligned with strategy. They see a specific problem, let's say a massive backlog of intelligence analysis, and they see a vendor with a world-class product that claims to solve it.
Claims being the operative word.
The bees are not vaporware. Federal software vendors are building incredible world-class capabilities. They deserve a fair shot here. The argument I would make is that leadership often views your foundation, that critical governance piece, as a geeky administrative exercise. It is perceived as pure overhead. It's bureaucracy. It's paper pushing that real operators simply do not have time for. When an agency buys a tool, they are trying to inject innovation into a stagnant system. If we wait for perfect data standards, we might be waiting 5 years. By then, the tech wave has completely passed us by. We have to prioritize the mission and the tools that enable it, not the paperwork.
I am just not convinced by that line of reasoning because it creates a total false dichotomy between doing the paperwork and achieving the mission. Let's go back to the concept of the software landfill. This isn't a hypothetical place. It is the graveyard where expensive platforms go to die, usually about 18 months after procurement. You mentioned that vendors deserve a fair shot. I agree. No product manager wants their software to sit unused and unloved on a federal server. But why does it happen?
Well, usually the argument after the fact is poor integration.
Or a lack of workforce training. The users just didn't adopt it. Right, but those are symptoms. The actual disease is the incredible demo trap. You argue that agencies need to buy the vision. But when Dave tells Jen that the dashboard had live charts, he is falling for a complete mirage. In a sales demo, the data is perfect. It is a highly curated JSON file or a spotless CSV specifically architected by a sales engineer to make those pie charts spin. It represents a happy path scenario that literally does not exist in the wild.
But that mirage sells the possibility. That momentum is highly valuable. You cannot inspire a federal workforce with a 50-page PDF about data lineage standards. You just can't. You inspire them with a tool that looks like it works. If you get the tool in the door, you force the agency to adapt to it. It acts as a forcing function for modernization.
Does it, though? Or does it just create a wildly expensive paperweight? Because getting a purchase order and a few installs is like getting a tee time at an exclusive golf course. It doesn't mean you can actually play golf. That is the distinction. The vendor is selling you the tee time. They are assuming you know how to swing the club, which in this analogy is your data governance. When you bring that tool in and you feed it your actual agency data, which is ungoverned, unstructured, highly duplicated, and non-authoritative.
The messy reality.
The messy reality. The tool fails. It breaks. The charts don't load. The search returns 0 results. And then what happens? We blame the vendor. We say, oh, this 7-figure tool is junk. But the tool was fine. We just brought it to a gunfight armed with a banana.
I appreciate the analogy. I really do. But I think you are severely underestimating the evolution of the technology itself. You are describing a problem that existed in the era of rigid SQL databases and hard-coded dashboards. But we aren't in 1995. We are talking about large language models and ingestion engines in 2026 that are specifically designed to handle messiness. There is a strong belief, and I think it is a valid one, that modern AI is, for lack of a better word, magic when it comes to unstructured data.
Magic. That is a highly dangerous word in systems engineering.
Relative to legacy systems, yes, it is magic. If I have a massive repository of PDFs, messy field reports, and sprawling email chains, I can point a modern AI tool at it, and it can synthesize that information. I do not need to spend 2 years manually tagging metadata before I get value. The tool does the heavy lifting. The AI essentially becomes the governance layer, or at least the translation layer. That is why I argue we shouldn't be afraid to buy the tool first. The tool solves the data problem.
I have to strongly disagree with that. That reliance on AI magic to fix structural laziness is a huge liability. It is not a strategy. There is a phrase that has been the Mick Jagger of IT catchphrases for decades: garbage in, garbage out. It is making a massive comeback right now, because it is true, perhaps now more than ever.
But does it still apply when the garbage processor is a super intelligent probabilistic model?
Absolutely. In fact, the stakes are much higher. Think of it this way. Handing a world-class AI product ungoverned, non-authoritative data is like handing Gordon Ramsay a kitchen full of expired ingredients and then blaming him when the dinner tastes terrible. Gordon Ramsay is a world-class chef. The tool is world-class. But the chef isn't the problem. The pantry is the problem.
If the ingredients are rotten, the output is rotten.
Okay, but isn't a RAG-based chatbot, retrieval augmented generation, specifically designed to filter through that? It retrieves the relevant context and answers the question based on what it finds.
There is a massive difference between a novelty demo and a production system. A RAG-based chatbot that ingests unstructured PDFs might give you an answer, sure, but ask it the same complex regulatory question on Monday and then ask it again on Friday, you might get a completely different answer. Because the underlying data lacks version control or authoritative tagging, it pulls from a draft document one day and a superseded policy the next. It spits out what I call unreliable garbage for our most important mission data.
So you are calling these massive federal AI deployments a party trick?
If it cannot provide the authoritative, correct response consistently, every single time, then yes, it is a party trick. It is not governed infrastructure. We are already seeing reactive AI solutions in agencies spitting out severe hallucinations because they were fed contradictory data from 3 different silos. That isn't magic. That is a lawsuit waiting to happen.
I see the risk regarding hallucinations, certainly. The consistency argument is very strong. But let's shift gears and look at the human element of this. You talk about governance as this sterile, absolute necessity. But right now, in every agency building across the Capitol, there is a hero keeping the lights on, the spreadsheet jockey.
Ah, yes, the hero. I know exactly where this is going.
The enterprise systems are failing. The data is a mess. The dashboards are blank. This person, let's call him Bob, stays up all night. He whips up an incredibly complex Excel file. He is manually linking cells, fixing zip codes, scrubbing duplicates by hand. And he produces the chart just in time for the briefing. Everyone applauds. Bob saves the day. That represents agility. That represents a human who understands the mission and gets it done, completely regardless of the governance status. You want to replace that passion with policy?
I want to perform an emergency, highly painful tattoo removal of that exact habit.
That is incredibly harsh. Bob is literally keeping the agency running.
Bob is human middleware. And what you call heroism, I call artisanal data processing. It is completely unsustainable. It is like watching a matador take a bow after the 8th pass. The crowd goes wild, they throw flowers, but the bull is still in the ring.
But the job got done. The briefing happened. The director got the intelligence they needed to make a decision.
But at what cost? And with what reproducibility? Sooner or later, the math catches up with you. Relying on a spreadsheet jockey is the exact opposite of automation. You cannot automate a process that fundamentally depends on Bob staying up until 2 a.m. to manually fix the zip codes in column E, because the source system doesn't validate fields. Agencies are trying to reach true data maturity, but they are stuck in this vicious cycle of manual heroism. If your mission operations suffer from a systematic reliance on human middleware, you are not modernizing. You are just digitizing chaos. What happens when Bob retires or Bob gets sick? The mission fails.
So you are saying we need to stop applauding the firefighters and start installing sprinklers?
Precisely. We need to move from the chaos of bullfighting to the absolute precision of a Blue Angel show. When you watch the Blue Angels, you aren't seeing heroism in the sense of desperate improvisation. You are seeing rigid adherence to standards, to governance, to procedure. It looks boring on the inside, so it can look spectacular on the outside. That requires discipline, not just effort.
And that brings us to the culture war, which I actually think is the biggest hurdle here. You keep using words like discipline and standards. I am telling you, as someone who looks at the budget and the political pressure, leadership views this as bureaucracy. It is incredibly hard to sell standards when the agency wants dashboards. How do you convince a non-technical leader, a political appointee perhaps, that they need to shift funding from a flashy tool buy to spend $1 million on governance when they get nothing visually cool to show for it? It feels like a geeky administrative exercise unrelated to critical operations.
That is the hurdle. It is the vegetables before dessert argument. But we have been here before in federal IT. Think about program management as a discipline.
How so?
Go back 20 or 30 years. Things like master scheduling, configuration management, earned value management. These were seen as kids' table activities. The real operators, the engineers turning wrenches, and the pilots, they didn't think they needed them. It was viewed as pure overhead. Just let us build the plane. Until what happened?
Projects collapsed, budgets evaporated. We had cost overruns in the billions.
Exactly. Entire high-profile programs were publicly canceled. It took a generation of very expensive, very painful lessons before program management earned its seat at the adults' table. Now, you wouldn't dream of running a major acquisition without a master schedule. Data governance is fighting that exact same battle today. It is currently sitting at the kids' table. But the agencies that figure this out, the ones that realize governance is a mission enabler and not a blocker, they will modernize years ahead of the others.
That is a strong historical parallel. But do you have proof of that in the data world right now? Or is this just theoretical best practice? Because if I am an IT manager, I want to see a win before I commit to the vegetables.
It is happening right now. Look at the FAA legacy system consolidation. This is public knowledge. We are talking about over 200,000 complex records regarding aircraft and parts. They had a choice: buy a fancy tool and dump the data in, or clean the house first.
And they actually chose the hard path. They mapped the data.
They did. They moved from siloed legacy systems into a single governed registry. They did the hard, unglamorous work of governance and standards first. They rigidly defined what an aircraft actually was in the data schema before they tried to manage it or exchange it.
And the result of that upfront investment?
It was like giving Red Bull to the AI components that came later. Because the data was structured and authoritative, the AI tools could ingest it without hallucinating. They tested it using local AI models to help highlight data quality gaps. It worked because the foundation was there. It wasn't a party trick. It was a highly reliable production system. They achieved speed through structure.
That is a very compelling case study. It suggests that the slow way might actually be the fast way in the long run.
Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. It is a cliche because it works.
I have to admit, the image of the software landfill really haunts me. We have all seen it. The cycle of excitement, the massive procurement, the deployment, and then silence. The login logs just drop to zero. And I agree that we cannot keep treating these data silos as the disease when they are really just a symptom of the lack of governance.
And that is exactly where the partnership comes in. This isn't about bashing vendors. Vendors want successful deployments. They want renewals.
Right. I think my takeaway here is that while I love the speed of 2026, and I genuinely believe the tools are incredible, the magic really does evaporate without the fuel. You can't run a Ferrari on sand. And relying on human middleware, relying on Bob at 2 a.m. is a severe vulnerability. It is not a strategy. As much as I want to defend the mission-first mentality, if the mission depends on data, then the data is the mission.
That's it. You cannot microwave your way to a Michelin star. You just can't. You can get a hot meal quickly, but it won't be excellent, and it certainly won't be sustainable.
I suppose not. So for the agency leaders and IT managers listening right now who are holding that checkbook, looking at a glossy brochure, what is the final word?
We have to go back to those 4 words: data governance, data standards, data management, data exchange. If agencies can commit to that sequence, the software tools they buy in the last 2 steps won't just work, they will thrive. The dashboards will finally stop lying to leadership, and that 7-figure tool won't end up in the landfill.
And that is something we can all agree on. We want vendors to succeed. We want agencies to succeed. We want to empty the landfill.
Precisely. The car is on the road. The technology is absolutely here. But those 4 words have to drive. If we get the first 2 right, the last 2 take care of themselves.
It is a challenge, but a necessary one. Thanks for the debate.
Thank you. And to our listeners, good luck with your data. Welcome to the Adults Table.